May I now invite Harit for the inaugural address. Harit.
Thank you, Sanjay, for that lovely obituary. I'll take the words from you and pass it on to my children. I think they can speak those very words. It'll save them the botheration of writing a speech when I die. I was standing outside having a cup of coffee with Sanjay when I came in, and I just took a sneak peek inside, and I said, this looks like a young audience. I'd say, would I be wrong to say that in the next 10 years, each one of these would be a head of HR or HR director in some firm or the other? And he said, at least 50 to 60% of them would be CHROs in the next 5 years, and everybody would be a CHRO in the next 10 years, guaranteed. So my thought to myself was, why have you got a dinosaur like me here then, speaking to them? Because, I come from a generation when I started working 40 years ago, the term HR or human resources had not even been invented. We were called personnel managers. And we were called personnel managers essentially because the role of the function was to hire, appraise, issue increment letters, keep confidential reports under lock and key to be shown to the CEO, so to wield some power, manage facilities, and motivate people by making things like Rangoli. It stopped there. It didn't go beyond that very much. And I've seen the transition of this function move from personnel management to human resource management over the last 40 years. And maybe that's why it qualifies me to come here and talk about extrapolating what I've seen to the future and say, guys, I've seen this is the way it crumbles, and this is how it's going to crumble further, I guess. Or you can make it crumble further. So the business, it's not the HR function or the personnel function that has changed. I think business has changed and HR is played to the tunes of the business. And how has business changed? I mean, look at the last 40 years. If you had a license, you had a business. If you didn't have a license, you didn't have a business. So what are the differentiators that the business had when we started working? You had a license, you were in a business. You didn't have a license, you didn't have. You had access to capital, you had business. Otherwise, forget it. So only a handful of people got into business, the others could not. If you had a technology, access to technology, you captured it, you kept it to yourself, and then you made money off it. If you had access to a market, you were given access only to that market, and therefore you made money off it. These were the differentiators. If you had access to a distribution channel, you made money off it. So these were the kind of things. All that has changed. Everybody has access to capital. You don't need a license to start a business. Everybody has access to markets. In fact, there is more than one distribution channel, and new distribution channels are opening up every day. Somebody was offering you delivery in 1 day, then it became 1 hour, then it became 30 minutes, and nowadays it's 10 minutes. And things will change as by the time I reach home. So that's the speed at which things are getting disrupted today. So the nature of business has changed. And you don't need access to capital. If you have a half bad idea, also there is a private equity player or a VC waiting outside to sign on 30% of your firm, bet on you or gamble on you or whatever it is. So business has changed. The differentiators of the past are no more valid. What are the differentiators of the future? What will differentiate a business or sustain a business going forward? It's not license capital, technology, distribution, and things like those. Those are stupid old ways we did. I think for a business to grow or even come into place and then continue to grow, First of all, you need to identify a need of a customer that exists. Then you need to figure out a technology that can solve that problem for the customer. And then you need to make it available conveniently to the customer where he lives at a price he can afford. If these four things you can manage, you have a business. Nothing else is required. Everything else will fall into place. And you don't need to do it once. Not only do you need to do it once, you need to repeat it, and every repetition needs to be better than the previous time, because the customers, in the abundance of the number of soaps and shampoos and cars and everything that they have, they've got used to two things. One is continuity or certainty, that whatever you delivered last time, you have to be certain that you will give me that the next time I buy you. And the customer also wants a possibility that not only am I happy with what I got last time, I want an innovative improvement on that. Every time you consume the same ice cream, you're looking for an improvement on it. Right or wrong? That's how spoiled we are today versus our parents' generation or even my generation. We used to have 2 soaps and 1 shampoo when we grew up. And only 2% of India used a shampoo. Today, 98% does. So that's the difference between our generation and what's sitting here, roughly. And imagine what will happen to the next generation. So therefore, an investor or a CEO needs to have a vision. But that vision, for it to become a reality, it needs a culture. The culture that will convert that vision into a reality somewhere, and culture is made out of people. People who are aligned to that shared vision, have a common purpose in life of getting there. They work collaboratively to execute and deliver. Now, what is a work culture? I often walk into boardrooms and meetings and I ask people, भाई मुझे ये बताओ एक word में, what is the work culture of your place? And invariably, I've got a bunch of 7 or 8 words. 1 word. You're not allowed 2 words. 1 word. Invariably, I've got pictures of those whiteboard things on my phone. It's the same set of 10 words that I get. And those 10 words include things like caring, trust. I'm reading those because I've got them here. Pride, integrity, family. I'm sure if I was to ask this room also to identify or define the work culture of your place, you would use words like these. Right or wrong? Unfortunately, these are not work culture words. These are core values. Core values that our mothers taught us when we were growing up. Without these, you're not allowed to come to work. These are basics. If you don't have these, please don't come to work. People should not be allowed to enter an office or even a home if you don't have these basic values. So then what is work culture? What are the work culture words? Work culture words, every business is where it is today. And every business has an aspiration of getting to where it wants to be. And the people who will carry it need to behave in a particular manner, all of them in unison, together, collaboratively. What is required for a particular firm to move from where it is to where it wants to be? The behaviors that are required are work culture words. And they are not the same for every firm. They can't be the same for every firm. It depends on where your industry is in the life cycle. Are you a nascent industry? Are you a mid-life cycle industry? Are you a matured industry? Your work culture words will be different for each one of these stages. Where is your company in that industry? Are you a leader? Are you a mid-level player? Or are you just trying to get in there, a niche player? So depending on the industry and depending on your stage in that industry will be the work culture words. Why am I talking about these? Let me give you the example of the company that I work for. I mean, many years ago, more than a decade ago, we sat down and said, okay, where are we? What should our work culture be like? And we actually came down to a very reason-based, logic-based thing, saying in the FMCG business, everything was linear. Somebody bought the raw material, somebody bought the packaging material, somebody produced, somebody sold. And when the customer was bathing with that soap, everybody could be sleeping. In our business, from the conception of the idea to the creation of the product to the delivery of the product, there are at least 3 functions involved simultaneously, if not 5. And all of them need to be in the kitchen when the customer is consuming the product. Because it's real life-based, now real-time based kind of a product. It's not a soap. Yeah, we sold soaps, but not those kind of soaps, other soaps. So therefore, the first thing that was important was collaboration. The second thing that is required, work culture word that is required was, we were this small and the industry was this big. I'm talking about the DTH business at that point in time, 15 years ago. So there's a whole canvas to be painted. And nobody knows how to paint it. And we won't know till we try and fail a few times and succeed. And people are, whatever they try, they're succeeding on it. So therefore, the next best word that came to our mind was experiment. Unless we experiment, we will not know whether it is right or wrong. So people should be allowed to experiment, people should be allowed to fail, people should be allowed to succeed, and don't kill them if they fail. So therefore, experiment. And then we said, if we have to be collaborative, we need to work in project teams. And project teams need an owner who need not be the CEO or a leadership team member or the function head. He needs to be a specialist or the owner of that problem. And the people who are other people in the team need not be his level. They need to be, they could be any level. The person who's leading this project could be the junior most person in the group. And the next project could be the senior most person. And the third project, where he's a member of, he could be somewhere in the middle. But there needs to be one owner, because if 4 people are driving in a car to one destination, they can't be having 4 people with 4 steerings in their hands and 4 sets of brakes and 4 sets of accelerators, because you know where that car will go. There needs to be one owner. I put it very loosely and said, I have one hand and you have one neck. It can only go around one neck, so I need to know whose neck it should go through. So that's the owner. That was a very loosely stated. And therefore we formed, so our work culture words were collaborate, experiment, own. Unfortunately or fortunately, they added up to CEO, and everybody was designated CEO, and I lost my designation that day. But, so you need to find your work culture words. I mean, it could be speed, it could be whatever. I mean, like you find your. So HR's function going forward in the future, or role in an organization, needs to be identifying what are your work culture words and how will you keep these work culture words alive in the organization in a sustainable manner. Because you know, ये शोशा CEO हमने invent कर दिया, सबको मग दे दिया, सबको एक कॉफ़ी पिला दिया, केक खिला दिया, and then party कर दिया, and it lasts about 3 weeks. How do you sustain it over a decade? Till you discover a new set of work culture words depending on where your industry is landed. That's HR's role, according to me. It is not making only rangolis. That too, yes, but it's a little more than that. So that's the starting point. So if you don't know your role in the organization of the future, this is what it is going to be. Second, how do you keep it sustained? I'll just give you some examples. If you have to work collaboratively, You can't have a marketing department sitting here, you can't have a finance department sitting here, an HR department sitting here, an IT department sitting here, and you have a common meeting, but then they all go back to their own departments and say, abhi to hamara ye safe area hai. So we invented an open office where nobody's got a fixed seat, and it's not limited to the junior and middle management only. It goes all the way to the CEO. Everybody sits out in the open. Nobody has a fixed seat. I haven't sat in a cabin for the last 9 years now. We all sit out in the open. And we change seats 3 times a day depending on who we are working with, who we are collaborating with. Right? We don't carry out functional reviews. There is no marketing review or a finance review or an IT review or a technology review, because everything that we do is interdependent. So we carry out organization reviews or project reviews, so that whosoever's buy-in we want, it is taken then and there. These are difficult things to do. Believe me, people don't leave their domains with such ease. But that's the only way to survive in the era of the future. And a person who's failed twice in the last 1 year, and between a person and the second person who's succeeded in everything that he's done, who would I rate higher? The one who's failed twice. Because at least he's tried beyond his reach. It's said that successful surgeons stop taking difficult surgeries. Why? Because they don't want to kill their record. If you don't go beyond your reach, the organization is not going to survive. So that's what it is. Now, अब रंगोली भी बनाना है और ये सब भी करना है, तो कैसे होगा? टाइम किधर है? So for that, you need to outsource what is repetitive. People say we outsource to cut costs. That's the wrongest reason for anybody to outsource. You outsource to declutter your table, so that you make space for building a culture. So you identify things that are repetitive, that happen continuously, consistently, every day, where you're not adding value, but you're doing it because you're doing it. I remember a stage where I was running one of the circles in telecom, and my HR head used to go out every morning, and we used to run a call centers inside the company that time. He would go to Borivali, run a mela, acquire 25 call-taking agents, and by the time he got back to the office, 25 more had resigned. So he would go to Kandivali and acquire more, and then he would go to Malad and recruit more, and by every time he came back, so that's all he was doing. Why the hell are we doing this? So we outsourced that whole piece, not because it was cheaper to take the calls outside, but because, and then he got into, those days we used to call it L&D. So he got into L&D at that point in time. He had the time for it. So you have to declutter the table to create space for higher order things. So that's why we outsource. So we formed a mantra which said, strategy in, ops out. Which means, we will outsource, but we will not abdicate. We are still responsible for the outsourced jobs and people. We take ownership of them. So what we'll do is, the design is something we will outsource. We'll keep in. The quality control is something that we'll keep in. The doing we'll keep out. So while we take the doing out, we'll keep the design and the quality. And increasingly, most of the organization has become design and QC. And everything that is repetitive is out. As a result, when we were 1/10 of our current size, we were 1,600 people in the company. Today, at 10 times the size, we are 1,200 people inside the company. We were 10,000 people outside then, we are 40,000 people outside now. But every one of those 40,000 people works on our own platform created by us, on which we know by the second who's doing what is doing. So that's how you outsource. The other thing that we need to be cognizant of is, we started as hunter-gatherers, we became agriculturists, we then went into the industrial era, and very recently have we gone into the knowledge management space. More than half our organization is sitting in knowledge management era. Things change. In the industrial era, we used to get people by the hour, breathe down their necks while they delivered what they delivered, and made sure that they delivered 10 this time instead of 9 yesterday. These days, no. People don't need to be breathed down their necks. They bring in their mind, they don't bring their horsepower to the job. Not all. There are some people who bring horsepower, and most people bring knowledge and their minds to the job. How do you handle them? So, we've stopped marking attendance 10 years ago. And COVID's got over, but we haven't gone back to work. We're still working from home. We go to work when we want to go to work. So the mantra is, when we have to work in team and think about the future, we go to work. When we have to do reviews, we do from home. And that's the formula we've adapted. I sometimes go to work once a week, sometimes twice, sometimes 4 times, depending on what I have to do. There are people who go to work 5 times a week or 6 times a week because they have to work in teams all the time. So it's left to people. They are answerable for deliverables. They're not answerable for the number of hours they've worked. And that's how the future works. And that's how the future will be. Get used to it. Next thing, think about it yourself. So imagine the largest increment that you got in your life. How long did the joy last? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. But remember the time when, I remember the time when 39 years ago, my boss called me and said, we are also adding this territory to your job. And what is the feeling in my heart? He values me. He thinks I'm capable of doing more. I must be good. I still remember that day when I was just handling UP and he gave me the full north. I can't forget that day. That's where I started growing. So people like more responsibility, more than they like more increment. Believe that. So every time somebody quits in our place, the first thing we think of is, can this guy's job be given to somebody else? And 80% of the times we succeed. That's how we moved from 1,600 to 1,400 in a business that has grown 10x. I had 17 direct reports 5 years ago. I live with 7 today. Every time somebody's quit, I've added his job to somebody else. It sustains the other person who stayed back to stay back even longer. I'm overshooting my time, but I will take 2 more minutes. There was something called BCP, Business Continuity Planning, as CFOs would tell you. You would imagine the known unknowns and make a plan to face them when that event occurred. COVID happened. Could anybody have known this unknown? Could even have imagined what it brought to us? It was an unknown. So going forward, you don't need to be ready for known unknowns. Don't even plan for them. They're so easy. And you can't plan for unknown unknowns. You can only be prepared organizationally to handle these things. This COVID, the way we handled it, taught us 3 things about an organization that can handle an unknown. And those 3 things, according to us, were the distillate was, you need to have fewer layers in the organization, you need to have a collaborative culture, and you need to have an empowered frontline that meets, every time the unknown strikes you, that meets, assesses the problem, takes action, and keeps the upstairs informed, rather than going back and forth to take approvals. And that's the organization of the future, believe it or not. So net, and the last thing is, the CEO can only visualize, and HR has to enable it. Very often you will come across CEOs, you as CHROs, you'll come across CEOs who come from the marketing background, or finance background, or technology background, or, that's where they come from normally. They don't come from the HR background. So they're not culture vultures, really. So if you find a CEO who's not tuned to these kinds of culture words and things like that, it becomes HR's job to educate the CEO. Can't just say, मेरे boss को कुछ आता नहीं, and wash your hands of it. You need to educate that person for the betterment of the humanity. So net, because we need to build a work culture that differentiates us, and that license and money and technology, etc., can't. Only work culture can differentiate us. Our profession will survive and grow. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Nagpal. Can we have a louder round of applause for this very endearing thoughts and those address? Over to you, Sanjay sir.
Thank you very much. I think he's already decoded a lot of our HR playbook for us there, and I can't be more grateful than that. I think very, very refreshing. Overall, I think setting the context for very future-based organization, I think, and it's already in play and practice. So a lot of learnings from Tata Play that we all can take forward. Now, I think I just will pick up on a couple of questions, then have a couple coming from audience, Harit, on this one. I think now, because this evolving technology and artificial intelligence, and it's such a hot topic there, and in my experience, what I've seen over the last few years, especially the last about 2 to 3 years, I think the earliest adopters is actually the human resource function, yeah, in terms of picking up these technologies. And they've taken it to low-risk areas. That's understandable. You know, you take it in admin areas or routine areas and all these, chatbots or policy kind of documentation becoming all automated now on an access query button for employees there. Talent development. In fact, hiring now, I believe, has gone into a lot of artificial intelligence. You can do 2 or 3 levels of screening and sifting there. That's understandable. But to the credit of human resources function, they're already kind of looking at tasks which are repetitive, which you already are doing in Tata Play, you said, and either outsourced, delegated to machines. And that releases a lot of time for human resources now. And you did mention that, can I put them to profitable use? But I'll take a different vector here and ask you if this is possible. Now, can this early adoption and dissemination that human resources is doing on this technology front, can this leadership on technology unleash human resources to catapult to a C-suite or a boardroom faster than that we have seen in the last 20 years? Could this become a launch pad for human resource professionals? Because data binds everybody, technology binds everything there. They are the ones taking lead. That's getting released now. Do you see that happening far more in the next 5 years than you've seen in the last 20 years?
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, it's not typical of HR. Bots have been applied in every function, whether it's supply chain or whether it is marketing or whether it is sales or everywhere. So, when we sit down in the HR function, we say, "Apna bachcha sabko bada lagta hai." It has not just happened in the HR function, it's happened in every function, I would say. That's one. I also see the younger generation at the age of 28 to be more knowledgeable than we were at 28. And I expect the next generation's 28-year-olds to be equally knowledgeable to when we were 58, probably. That's because they've had more exposure to information, media, technology, and the experiences of the previous generation have added to them, and that's become their starting point.
Yeah, understand.
So, automatically, if you reach the level where we ended at, if that becomes their starting point, then their entry into the boardrooms is obviously going to be faster. Their entry into the C-suite is going to be faster. Yeah, not necessarily that they'll become board members or C-suites of $20 billion companies, but then there is no dearth of $100 million and $200 million and $300 million companies. And they can cut their teeth there and then grow there.
Understood. Oh, that's okay. The second point I wanted to really touch upon, Harit, is that HR function constantly lives in this friction between the two tracks of organization interest and employee interest. Yeah? It's constant friction there because organization, and very few CEOs and leaders, as you rightly said, and there is an education job that HR has that both are actually the same and it's not different there. But that's not the way they get perceived there. And if you overtly gravitate as an HR leader on one of the either organization interest in the name of transformation, restructuring, then you are a bad kind of a person there. Or if you gravitate this, then you are too much of a charitable, sociable function and you're not working in the organization. And it's a constant friction I've seen. Many, many organizations that go through there. Now, we are increasingly, while on one hand there are organizations like you, and you very evocatively talked about Tata Play's long-term success mantras and culture that you're trying to drive. But the fact is that short-term results, quarterly results, financial metrics do overwhelmingly, at times, overtake the longevity and perpetuity of organizations. Yeah? It's constantly there. And because HR's salaries are paid by the suited people like you, they tend to take this garb of restructuring, organizational interest, transformation, automation, whatever, to deliver some of those kind of not so popular measures when it comes to organizational interest there. Now this friction, in case the progressive leaders like you, Harit, are not there, and if there is a normal organization which is running, how do we interplay this friction? What should they do? Or if I have to pick up something saying, if HR has to pick up 2 or 3 non-negotiables from tomorrow, absolutely non-negotiables where, as you put, can you educate your CEO? What are those non-negotiables? Where a lot of them have to go back and they don't find Harit Nagpal sitting there, they find whosoever XYZ, and these are the non-negotiable boss. And I think this is longevity, perpetuity, and we must trade off the short term for the long term. People issues.
See, I'm not a quick fix master. I don't believe in find out 3 things and let's do these and sab kuch theek ho jayega. I think it all starts from your education, your thinking, your beliefs. I was very fortunate to get exposed to a concept. Some of you who are OB masters here would know the name of Blake and Mouton. How many have heard of him? So these two wrote a book about managerial grid, if some of you have been through it. So I got exposed to that and I got trained on that 35 years ago probably. And Blake and Mouton, through their managerial grid, strike a balance between concern for task and concern for people. That's what they do, task versus people. And they basically says that you can't have one day concern for task and one day concern for people. That doesn't balance. I think in every act you need to balance the concern for task and concern for people, because an organization is a living organism whose job is to deliver profits, but it also needs to look after the people while looking after the people and their interests. Interests of the people are changing, like I said, over generations. And you need to be conscious of that. So instead of deciding on 3 things, take your organization through anybody who's training people on that managerial grid. It's a 2-3 day session. Sab kuch theek ho jayega.
Okay. Now let me come back, and if there are any questions, we can pass it on from audience there, but I'll probably, in the interest of time, I have 2 questions, but let me start with this first. You wrote this book, Adapt to Thrive, Not Just Survive, in which, through your personal experiences, you kind of converted that into fictional stories and 10 business lessons. Yeah? That's really the synopsis of your book. Now, if for this audience, and you know the audience well now, you're to pick up 3 top things, again, I know you're not a professor of top 3 all the time, it doesn't change this, but from your perspective, if people have to walk out from a keynote speaker, 3 things that are must-dos, or the lessons they have served you the most in your career and will continue to serve, what will be those 2 or 3 top ones, high level?
It's strange that you ask, so you put the number 3, because the 3 of those 10 stories are real stories. It took me 1 hour to write each of them, because they were like personal accounts, and I just used another industry, another country, and another context to write those. Those 3 are about the way you conduct reviews. Instead of, so you disrupt and you adapt to a new way of doing reviews. And then there is one about finding a new culture. defining your culture. In fact, the CEO thing that I talked about, it's there as one of the stories. And these are the two I remember which were exactly our story. Third, it's skipping my mind at this point in time, but the third also, which is my story, I wrote it more than a year ago.
Okay.
So I won't offhand remember.
No, these are very, very relevant. Can we have a show of hands if somebody has, yeah, plus that lady on the central round table.
Mike's coming to you.
A very good morning, sir. Very good morning, sir. Thank you for your exemplary deliberation out there. I'm truly honored to have listened to you. My question is, sir, I'm working at Bank of Baroda, and I love my job to the core, but being in a PSU sector is a challenging role at times because, as you understand, it's highly bureaucratic and hierarchical. So I want to understand from you as a beginner, as a millennial HR, and we have a lot more Gen Zs coming into our team. I want to understand how do I put in a subtle manner or a very polite manner to my management, like whatever ideas we have, so that I can put across them without making them feel, insecure or, not to annoy them. But we do have some ideas and we want to put across to them in a polite manner. How do I do that? Because it's
You
very
answered
different.
you answered your question in your question itself.
I
You
don't think so.
put them in a manner that they don't feel annoyed and feel insecure and
Yeah,
feel
it's
whatever.
difficult. It's really difficult because
It is,
the
it
leadership
is.
is very tight, and it's not always appreciated. So I want to understand as a beginner, how do I put across all these things?
I was as young as you sometime.
Yeah.
I wasn't born at this age. So I also was young and I also had same thoughts as you. And first of all, don't curse yourself for being in a PSU because if you think the other side is less bureaucratic, it may be marginally less bureaucratic, but it is equally bureaucratic, one. And if you think every manager or every boss there is receptive and open and his door is open and he says, हाँ बताओ और idea क्या है मैं सुनना चाहता हूँ. No, it doesn't happen. I've had 16 bosses in my life. 3 of them taught me what to do and 13 of them taught me what not to do. I am grateful to those 13 who taught me what not to do because I'm not repeating those things. So that's the reality. And I've worked in the private sector all my life. Yeah, you need to propose or put forth your proposition in a manner that it doesn't sound, look, feel challenging to you don't challenge his integrity, his intelligence, his experience, whoever that is, and make it as data-based as possible. I mean, at least in my case, every time I put forth something, I put together an Excel sheet and took it forward. Or I took an example from another industry where this storybook is already played out and said, okay, this is what happened in this industry, this is what happened in I know this industry is different from ours, this is not banking. But the end of that, it's the same customer who goes, buys bread, buys a car, buys an insurance policy and buys a flight ticket. So he must be using the same criteria to to open a bank account, to deal with a bank also. And similarly for people.
I think it's a very, 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 very pertinent input if you picked it up, ma'am. Based on fact and diverse emotions from it, and then the decision is easier, for you to really do that. I think it's a great insight.
But you have to start with the fact that that man knows something.
Yeah, of course.
Don't discount the fact कि उसको कुछ नहीं आता. Most of the time, the problems start when you say इसको कुछ नहीं आता, मैं इसको सिखाऊंगी, and rest follows.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions there? Raise of hands again. Yeah, that's there. That's there. Yeah.
Good morning, sir. My name is Darshika Desai, and I'm from L&T. My question to you is, you mentioned one thing regarding attendance when you were talking about the culture at Tata Play. That really intrigued me because I sometimes think about this. When you talk about giving the freedom to your employees, it comes with no cost, but it also comes with a lot of people not understanding that ownership. So how do you ensure at your organization, which is that large, that people are actually owning that part where I am not being monitored, but I will make sure that my deliverables are there in place? So how do we do that?
Yeah, you have to have very sharp, clear deliverables and turnaround times, defined and put on paper. because you're working in collaborative teams. Everything is project-based. And everything can be a project, trust me. We started off without working in projects, but now everything is a project in collaborative teams. And if one pan is pulling that project down, the others will, revolt. And then there is organ rejection. Like, you put a wrong liver into my body, the body will reject it. Similarly, if you put a wrong person who's not fitting into that organization or the culture of that place, the rest of them reject it. Because you're bringing me, the whole organization, down. So if you have sharp deliverables and turnaround times defined, things happen.
Thank you. I think we are just short time, 5 minutes over 11 now. There is one question from the back. Yes, we see a raised hand. Let's take that. Yeah. Yeah, the gentleman standing at the back. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. It was nice to know all your experience. I have two questions. When we talk about future organizations and work culture, should we also be including learning culture into it? That's one. And how can HR play an important role in collaborating the learning culture along with the L&D?
Well, learning के बगैर तो कुछ होगा नहीं ना. Because if you're living in 1947 and running 2024, then you're nowhere. You're driving a Morris Minor. So you have to continuously upgrade your car. I mean, have you known, today's Teslas are like your iPhones or your Samsung phones. Every morning you have a new car. Because रात में उसमें software download हो जाता है नया वाला. तो सुबह उठ के आपको 3 नए feature मिलते हैं उसमें. So that's how organizations need to be. So the HR is the IT function of learning. Just like IT upgrades the software, HR needs to upgrade the learning or to make sure that the organization is learning and that learning is being captured, is getting documented, and the next generation or the next person or the next day, you're starting from a new level and not from a level दोबारा से वो नहीं पढ़ाना पड़े. जो गलती एक बार, we say make a mistake, you're allowed to, but don't make the same mistake every time, second time. Make new mistakes. That's how you're learning.
I think that's a great way to end it. And I see another hand lady that's raised it. But just to add on to what Harit said, I think we configured our organizations of 1947 till about 20th century on scalable efficiency paradigm. But what he said is so relevant. We need to now really think about configuring and remodeling organization on scalable learning models, because that's going to be the real differentiator and competitive advantage, which is sustainable. Let maybe take that one question from that lady at the end.
Hi, this is Divya. I actually hold around 20 years of industry experience working as an HR consultant. You made a very pertinent point around balancing between the concern for task and concern for people. So maybe if you would like to throw some more light around it. Where I'm coming from is that, with so much going around the mental well-being and the emotional well-being of people, and there are enough and more cases on social media around, many a times the unsaid is that, many a times, if I can take the liberty to say so, like people do tend to hide their inefficiencies behind the taboo of mental well-being. So, it's a very thin line, and as leaders, we would like to be empathetic. But what is your thought around balancing the two?
It's a very thin line, like you rightly said. What I was capable of doing 10 years ago, I'm capable of doing much, much more today. And the capability is rising so much because technology is helping me. What I used to had to look for in the past and spend time in looking for comes to me on a platter, and I start from there. So my benchmark can't be where I used to start from 5 years ago. The benchmark is changing. So people can deliver so much more. How much more is something that you need to calibrate. But it is rising. But not at the cost of, I have young nephews and nieces come home for dinner over weekends, and I ask them, I said, beta, reh jao thodi der aur. Nahi boss, chachu, wo presentation banani hai. I said, Sunday hai yaar, aaj to din rest ka hota hai, machine ko bhi milta hai. So, नहीं वो presentation कल भी रात को सारी रात बैठे रहे वो PPT बनानी है. First of all, this PPT culture is killing this whole bloody world. Seriously, what can be said in an Excel sheet? Why do you need to use a PPT for that? Half the world is making PPTs today. Work has not become difficult. Actually, work has become easier. We've made it more difficult. Every time I see a PPT in front of me, I said, किसी एक बच्चे का weekend गया है इस पे. So you need to be conscious of the human being. Challenge his capability. Make him do more, but only that much more. If you stretch that rubber beyond its capability, वो टूट जाएगा. They will leave you.
Thank you, Harit. I think it was fabulous. And let's give a big round of applause to Harit here. Yeah. Thank you so much.